Hello everyone, welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep channel in another episode of Knowledge Series, and today we are going to discuss the topic of causes of 1857 revolt. Remember, in 1857 revolt chapter, there are basically 5 parts, and the first part of that is the causes. Second one is what all events happened during the revolt, along with the fact that who were the leaders, which were the centers of the revolt. Third part is the reasons for the failure of the revolt. The fourth part is result of the revolt. What all happened after this? For example, the Government of India Act 1858. And the fifth and the last part of this chapter is the analysis of 1857 revolt. So basically, in this lecture of knowledge series, we are going to look at the first part of 1857 revolt. Remember, already a question from this chapter 1857 has come basically on the result of this. Why is this chapter so important? Because we know that this was the first major revolt that happened against the rule of the East India Company. So basically, some say that this was basically a watershed as far as the Indian history is concerned. Before 1857, after 1857. Now, without wasting any time, let's look into the reasons, the causes, what all led to the failure, or what all led to the causes, or what all led to the 1857 revolt. First of all, you can see there are economic causes, there are political causes, there are administrative causes, there are socio-religious causes. Of course, there are certain outside events which influence this whole revolt, and of course, we have the military causes. So if you see, with regards to the 1857 revolt, all aspects, every aspect of the socio-cultural, economic, as well as political life of or the daily existence of Indian population got affected, and all that resulted into this particular revolt. So in this chapter, let us now one by one look at all these causes. We'll start with economic. See here. First and the foremost reason why this revolt happened was, and this is something that our historians keep on pointing out, is that, see, this is the major reason, the economic, because the Britishers, as we all know, from the Battle of Plassey, 1757 till 1857, so basically it's like 100 years have passed. 100 years of misrule of the Britishers have taken place. And in these 100 years, who is ruling us? The East India Company. So the East India Company's misrule, they had destroyed our traditional economy. Remember always, before the arrival of British, Indians, we control almost every 25% of the world trade. By the time these people left in 1947 in our country, we were controlling hardly 1% of the world trade. So invariably, they destroyed our economy. A self-sufficient economy that India was transformed during their time into mainly an agricultural economy. They destroyed our industries, which you study as deindustrialization. So remember, all of you should remember this, that this economic causes we study in a much bigger manner when it comes to the economic history of modern India. Now, one by one, see here. High rate of taxation. You all know the Britishers, they are taxing our people at such a high rate that invariably our people, they are getting suffocated. They are feeling suffocated. And this has made their rule very, very unpopular. So this was one of the most prominent reason for the 1857 revolt. Apart from that, as you know, more than 90% of our population in those days are peasants. And the Britishers, without caring for these peasants, they usually charge a very exorbitant rate. So land revenues, they have established a new style of land revenue collection method, which was the zamindari system, or also called your permanent settlement. Specifically in the northern areas of our country, this permanent settlement was brought in 1793. Under this, a new class of landlords known as zamindars were brought, and they were usually not that much related to the peasants of the villages and all. Sometimes they would also be absentee zamindars. So invariably, without caring, without thinking that what would be the situation of the peasants, they would be charging a lot of taxes at this point of time, very high rate of taxes. That also made our people, specifically the peasants, very, very angry. Third reason, middle and upper class. Again, in northern India, they are hit hard. Why has this happened? Please understand, when EIC came, every higher post, so earlier, let's say there was a king. You know now, kings, they have been usually removed. Now, under the king, there would have been many high salaried officers. So king would have maintained or would have kept one officer to take care of his horses, another officer to take care of his buildings, third officer to take care of something else. Now all these people, they have lost their jobs. And instead of them, the new class, the higher and upper class, they are who? They are usually the English. So invariably what has happened? The upper classes, the upper jobs that are there is now being taken over by the Britishers or the English, and because Indians were not getting those jobs, that also hit them very hard. Remember, let's say if I was a very high paying officer in those days, let's say I used to keep the or maintain the treasury of the king, so I would get very high salary. Invariably, when I am getting very high salary, I would be in a position to buy the goods, costly goods. So let's say if there is a weaver, that weaver has made a very beautiful sari. So I can buy that sari for, let's say, my wife or my family members. But now when I am no longer having the job, invariably I cannot buy those clothes. So remember, not only I am suffering because I don't have the money, but then the person who made that beautiful sari, the weaver, he's also suffering right now, because why would he make the sari anymore when this man is not going to buy it? Because I told you, who is replacing me? I am being replaced by another Englishman whose taste, whose affiliation is very different. The Englishman is not going to buy that sari. So remember, all these craftsmen, they were destroyed at this point of time. One is this reason. You can see the same point I'll explain here again. Another is because now the British want that their industrial revolution should be successful. So invariably, in order to make their industrial revolution successful, they want that their goods should be used, bought in India. Invariably for that, it is very much required that the Indian industries, they should be ruined. That process is called deindustrialization. So invariably because of this, the Britishers adopted certain policies like discriminatory tariff policy. That is, if their goods are coming to our country, let's say 0 to 5% taxes. If our goods are going abroad, sometimes the duties would be 100 to 200%. So discriminatory tariff policy would be there. All this, please understand, peasants are unhappy, craftsmen are unhappy. Definitely these people who were having these higher paid jobs, they are unhappy. Our industries have got deindustrialized, which would have invariably resulted into a lot of job loss, that is unemployment. And all this resulted into the fact that the people were compelled to go ahead and get involved in the 1857 revolt. Remember, most of the Indian historians, they say that this was the most important reason that led to the 1857 revolt. But beyond this economic causes also, there are certain other causes. Before I move into the next slide, remember, this particular slide we study in a much bigger manner when we are studying the chapter of economic history of modern India. There, all these concepts separately we study. So the concepts like the revenue collection methods like permanent settlement, Mahalwari, Ryotwari, we study over there. Deindustrialization, we study over there. How did our traditional industries and our craftsmen, they were ruined at that point of time, we look into that. So all that we study in a much bigger detail in this particular chapter. Let's move to the second reason, that's your political causes. Now see, last week, in my last class, I've already talked about doctrine of lapse. And you can see here, that is also one of the political causes. So, the first political cause is loss of political prestige. What is this? See, loss of political prestige is basically that they would invariably break their pledges and promises, which resulted into their prestige going down. See, they were like politicians. You know, we see when the elections come, the politicians come and say, this time the road will be constructed. Fine enough. 5 years later, they again come, say, this time definitely the road will be constructed. Okay, fine enough. 10 years down the line, again when they come, you say, no, you all the time promise, you pledge, but you don't do that. Same thing has happened with the Britishers. For example, they had signed this subsidiary alliance with the Amirs of Sindh. Yet, in 1843, they attacked Sindh and annexed Sindh. So you all can see, what was subsidiary alliance? An alliance where they had promised that they will safeguard any of the Indian princes against outside attacks and even internal disorders. But what did they do? They themselves attacked us. So, do you think anybody would take their words? Everybody knows that these people, they are liars. Number two, the policy of trade and commerce invariably also impacted the native rulers. See, let's say if there is a state, in this princely state, invariably lots of industries, they would be owned by the native princes, rulers. But the sort of policies that these Britishers have adopted, where I showed, for example, discriminatory tariff policy, invariably that would have hurt these princely states also. So our rulers also would not be happy at times with them. Thirdly, all these policies, see, direct annexation, for example, in 1799, Mysore was annexed. Similarly, 1843, Sindh was annexed. Doctrine of lapse, in my previous lecture, we have already discussed. If you remember, Jhansi, one example. Similarly, subsidiary alliance, Awadh had signed it during the time of Wellesley. Later we saw Awadh was annexed during the times of Dalhousie under the charges of malgovernance, misadministration. So all these British policies through which they were trying to expand their empire also resulted into the fact that this prestige of these Britishers was going down, and this all were the political reasons which compelled the Indians to take participation in the 1857 revolt. See, remember, Rani Lakshmi Bai, she got involved in 1857 because her kingdom Jhansi was taken by the Britishers. Similarly, if you look at Nana Sahib, why did he get involved in 1857? Because his pension was stopped. Similarly, Begum Hazrat Mahal, why did she get involved in this 1857 revolt? Because Awadh was taken on charges of maladministration. So everybody who got involved, when we talk about the feudal lords or the feudal chiefs at this point of time, they got involved in the 1857 revolt because they were at some moment or at some place definitely been hampered by the British policies. Let's move to the third one. The military causes, very, very important. See, overseas deployment, what is this? Basically, in those days, there is a feeling amongst the Hindus, a wrong idea that if they cross the sea, they will lose their religion. So invariably, the higher castes among the Hindus, they would not want to go in the sea or go through ship and go to other outside countries. Now, what has happened is Canning has brought an act, General Service Enlistment Act of 1856. Under this act, you cannot say no. If you are asked that, for example, let's go to Burma, let's fight over there, we have to go through sea, you cannot say no to that. Invariably, Indian soldiers are unhappy because what you can see, Hindus, they are worried that they might lose their religion. And you know, people are going to be very, very unhappy if they feel that they are going to lose their religion. Number 2, salary discrimination among same ranks. What has happened? Let's say there is an Indian soldier and there is an European soldier. They both are at the same rank. But what is happening? This man's salary is this, Indian salary is only this. So invariably, though myself and another British officer, we are doing the same duty, but his salary is here, my salary is here. Invariably, I'll be unhappy. Third, bhatta is refused. What is bhatta? Allowance. What is this? Earlier, if I'm an Indian soldier, if I would go abroad, the Britishers invariably would be paying me one allowances. But now the British administration has decided that they will no longer be paying this bhatta. So earlier I would get this foreign service allowance. Now I shall not be getting that. Invariably I am unhappy. Now some of you might be thinking that, sir, it might be a very small component of their salary. Why would they be so angry that they will participate in the 1857 revolt? Remember, number one, their salaries was not that huge. So moment there is any allowances is being brought down, invariably that would cause a lot of resentment in those days. Fourth, see, even if, for example, I'm an Indian soldier and I'm brilliant, I'm absolutely brilliant, but then also my chances of promotion are limited. If I'm at this point here, I'll be only going till here. I'll never rise more than this. So basically, all the senior positions, all the key geographical positions, all the key military positions, they will only be filled by the Europeans or the Britishers. We would never ever get the chance to go to very senior positions. So all the senior positions are reserved for them. And I, whatever am I, however brilliant I would be, I would never get those senior positions. So invariably, I'm angry. Next one, Post Office Act of 1854. Now this act, you know, this is an innovation of Lord Dalhousie. Earlier days when the Indian soldiers would write letters, they would not be charged for that. But now the Indian soldiers also need to pay for that, and invariably under this act, they would have to pay. So the soldiers were angry, they were unhappy. Now again, I know some of you would be thinking, sir, how much would it cost? If you go and look into Bipin Chandra says that in those days writing letters may cost a person, a skilled man's 4 days salary. So it was humongous because it's a new innovation. So invariably charges were high, soldiers are disappointed. Lastly, religious identities are always in crisis. I'm an Indian soldier, I'm a Hindu soldier, or I'm a Muslim soldier. All the time there is a worry that I might be tried to be converted into Christianity. The propagation of Christianity would happen and they would try to convert me into another religion. That was another big problem. Lastly, regular humiliation. See, they would always be discriminating against the Indians based on the skin color. And we would be brown or black for them. We would never be equivalent to them. They would always treat us as an inferior civilization, both the Hindus as well as Muslims or the Sikhs. So invariably there was this regular humiliation happening, which again made our soldiers revolt in those days against the Britishers. Moving ahead, we have administrative causes, and the first major cause is the corruption. See, some historians even say that this corruption that we see today in India, this is a result of what the Britishers have done. There was a lot of corruption in those days in companies' administration. Specifically, the lower administration was very much corrupt, and that resulted into the deterioration of the living standards of the common people of those days. So invariably, the common man was unhappy with their rule and resulted into their participation in the 1857 revolt. Apart from that, complex judicial system. These Britishers, they have brought these new systems. Earlier systems like panchayats and all, they were very simple. Would not be that costly. But now, these systems that have been introduced during the times of Warren Hastings, later Cornwallis, then William Bentinck, these are very complicated. And these complex judicial system is something which the Indians are not that appreciative of. They are unhappy with this. And again, this is another cause of our 1857 revolt. Apart from this, the character of the British rule always imparted a foreign and alien look. That is, there was an absentee sovereignty. Remember, where is the Queen? In London. She is not in India. If you look at their fooding, if you look at their clothing, everything is very distinct. See, before them also, they were invaders. The Mughals came from outside. The slave dynasties or these Khiljis, Tughlaqs, they came from outside. But when they came from outside, they invariably settled in India. Unfortunately, with the Britishers, they never ever attempted to settle in our country. Along with that, you all know, at this moment, they continued their drain of wealth. They would take out the money from our country. So, this also resulted in an absentee sovereignty. They were never here. That was another administrative cause. And this is again, see, this we have seen in the military only, that in the military, the higher senior positions would not be given to the Indians. But that was not limited only to the military. It was there everywhere. So you can see natives, they would not be given higher appointments, higher senior positions. In fact, Cornwallis had a feeling, he had famously said, every Hindustani is a corrupt, and had decided that any job which pays more than 500 pounds per annum, Indians would be excluded from those jobs. So this you can see very clearly, you can see here that they were excluding us from the higher positions, not only in military, but everywhere else also. Moving from administrative causes, let's go to the socio-religious causes. See, the first and the foremost is here, the Religious Disabilities Act or the Lex Loci Act. Please understand, let's say I am a Hindu and of course my son will also be a Hindu. Tomorrow if my son converts him to Christian religion. So earlier what would have happened is that now my son would have been debarred from all my property. He would not get or he would not inherit my property. But under the Lex Loci Act, now my son can inherit my property. He can get my property even if he has converted to this particular language, this particular religion. So this act clearly showed the Britishers wanted that the Indians, or basically the Hindus, they could convert to Christianity without fearing that will they lose their property or not. So this was very clear. So you can see this modified the Hindu customs. That is, now if you are changing your religion, does not debar you from inheriting the property of your father. So clearly the rumor was that they were trying or conspiring to convert the Indians to Christianity. Apart from that, efforts like abolition of sati or the Widow Remarriage Act, all this had angered the Orthodox Hindus. Orthodox Hindus were angry because the Britishers were interfering in the customs, the traditions of the Hindu religion. So Orthodox Hindus were angry at this point of time. Of course, both Hindus as well as Muslims, they are unhappy because there is a policy to tax their religious schools, which was being done for the first time. Again, both these religions, they are angry at this point. And one of the highlights which you will see when you are reading the whole chapter of 1857 revolt is the Hindu-Muslim unity. You can see both these religions, they are getting affected at the hands of the Britishers. Apart from that, racial discrimination, they were always trying to forcefully convert Indians to Christianity. This we have seen here also. In the military thing also we saw that there were regular humiliations done against the Indians on the basis of their color of the skin. And of course, lastly, these accusations, they are saying we Hindus, we Muslims, we don't have any traces of civilization, we are bigots, we are cruel, we are faithless. All this, they would try to demean our religions. They would try to show our religion not to be of their equivalent. As you all know, they always believed we Indians to be what? White man's burden. Finally, one more cause, influence of outside events. Remember, all the time, the British rule in India was on one factor, invincibility. They said nobody can defeat them. They said we are whites, we are mighty whites, nobody can defeat us. But what do we see? In our country, in Punjab wars, the Sikh soldiers, they fought valiantly against them. Similarly, in the first Afghan war, they were defeated by the Afghans. Now you all know when the Afghan wars happened at this point of time, and when these Britishers, they got defeated, this gave us a psychological boost that if our neighbors can defeat them, why can't we? These Britishers, they used to claim that they are invincible, white, nobody can defeat them, but now we know, yes, they can be defeated. Our neighbors have defeated. We have given them a good account at this point of time. Even in the Crimean War, you all know Crimea, so much in news because it was a part of Ukraine, later annexed by Russia. All these places, the Britishers, they were impacted a lot, and that gave a huge boost. It was having a lot of psychological boost as far as the Indians were concerned, that yes, we can defeat them. Last but not the least, the immediate cause, you all know that they have introduced a new type of rifle known as infield rifle, and in that a new cartridge is there which had to be bitten off by the mouth. Now there is a rumor going on that this cartridge had the fat of cow and the pig used. Now you all know cow is sacred to the Hindus and pig is forbidden to the Muslims. So invariably both the communities, they were very, very angry when this rumor had circulated in those days. Along with that, the another rumor was that there was bone dust was being mixed in the atta flour, and because of these two feelings or these two things, there was a growing anti-British feeling at this point of time, and this has resulted into the revolt of 1857 now beginning at this point of time. Just to show you, and you can see here how this was the grease cartridge, how it was to be loaded. You had to bite it, then you had to fill it in the gun, then you had to use this ramrod, and then only it could be fired. Now this was all from the discussion of 1857 causes. I have tried to give you almost all the causes in the time span that I had. Let me now look at some of the best questions that have been asked in this session, which will help everyone. See, subsidiary alliance, again, see here. Subsidiary alliance, yesterday in the doctrine of lapse also, I had talked about it in a very quick manner. Remember, the Britishers will appoint a British resident in your state. You are forced to maintain British army at your cost. Of course, you have no foreign alliance. You cannot make foreign alliances. You cannot declare a war on your own. Fire all Europeans if you have employed them except the English, and in return of all this, the Britishers promise to safeguard you against external danger and internal disorder. The worst point of subsidiary alliance was, if you cannot pay for the army, they will take your territory. What was the main cause of 1857? Whatever we discussed, all of them are causes, of course, for different sections of the people, and immediate cause is the rumor. Now, judicial system is complicated in what terms? I told you, before the advent of the British system of judiciary, we have our own system of the panchayats, where the elders in the villages, they would resolve all the disputes between families or between the members of the village community. But now you have to go to the higher courts, circuit courts are there, Sadar Adalats are there. So invariably those would be at some other places. So you have the complication of going to some other places. These new rules you have to understand, which Britishers have brought, these new mechanisms of lawyers and all. Of course, you are spending a lot of money in judiciary now. So all of that has made this very, very complicated. Why 1857 revolt has weak leaders in spite of many sufferings and discrimination? See, this will not be correct to say that our leaders were weak. I can take the fact that yes, you can call them inexperienced. For example, let's take example of Rani Lakshmibai. You cannot call her to be weak. She was very, very brave. Of course, you can call her because she was for the first time fighting here. So that inexperience might be there, but calling them weak would be totally an inappropriate word. So whether it is Nana Saheb, whether it is Rani Lakshmi Bai, whether it is Tantia Tope or Babu Kunwar Singh, Hazrat Mahal, they all are very, very brave. That's why you can understand they are ready to fight the most powerful empire of that particular era. Can we say 1857 revolt is lightning for independence? See, again, it depends. Different historians, different ideology. For example, if we talk about V.D. Savarkar, definitely you can call, he says that this was the first war of Indian independence. Even Karl Marx says, yes, this was. But if you see people like R.C. Majumdar, he says, the prominent historian, that 1857 was neither first nor national nor a war of independence. So please remember, how do you interpret? It depends on the views of the historians. Some will call, yes, it is an independence movement. Others will call, no, it is not that. Sir, what was the role of Bahadur Shah, the last Mughal in the 1857 revolt? Please remember, Bahadur Shah Zafar was a weak ruler because he was on pension. He became a ruler around 1837. So for the last 20 years, he has been on pension, what Britishers would have been giving him. So Bahadur Shah was now forced, the soldiers, the sepoys, they had forced Bahadur Shah Zafar to become the ruler, to lead this 1857 revolt. He was not very happy. So what happened was that his leadership was not very, very appropriate. Some say at times he would be vacillating, at times he would like to be a ruler. At another moment he would like to talk to the Britishers that, see, if tomorrow something happens, please treat me leniently. The fact that he was being controlled by Zinat Mahal, his wife, and his sons also did not help the matter. But then the sepoys in those days, in their wisdom, thought that he was the perfect choice of the person to lead it. But the fact that, a man more than of the age of 80 perhaps was the weak link of this particular 1857 revolt. Now, how to make notes, short notes. See, I always tell people in the classes, if you look at this, when you are making the short notes, based on whatever, for example, I just now made a PPT. You can use these PPT as your short notes. You can have those, I would say, your mind maps, where you can have the 5W1H questions, why, when, where, who, and like that. You can make those mind maps, which will be very easy for you to revise in the later days. Why Sikh was not able to support the revolt? See, basically the Sikh population and the Sikh leadership did not want to fight the 1857 revolt under Bahadur Shah Zafar, who was a Mughal king. And Sikh, they are what? They are a rebel states. They fought against the Mughals, and thus they had established their empire. If you remember, people like Banda Bahadur, Banda Bairagi, they were fighting continuously against the rule of Bahadur Shah, later Farrukhsher. So they had not forgotten what the Mughal and their relation was earlier days, and that's why they didn't want to fight this 1857 revolt under the leadership of the Mughals. Sir, history seems to be invincible at this stage. UPSC picks up random terms and put questions on it. How to cover history? Again, please remember, in history, the tough questions, they are coming from the ancient medieval history. If you look at modern, this year also, 4 questions came. I would say 3.5 out of 4 was very, very easy at this point of time. As far as ancient medieval is concerned, I think what we need to do is we need to change our methodology, how we are studying. We'll have to go much more deeper because random questions are asked. And again, I'll tell you one more thing. Who wants to know which type of cap Sayyids used to wear? If that question has come, leave it. It is, I can tell you, 99.99% in this exam would not have been able to answer that question. Who would have read Arth Shastra in that detail? Nobody. So invariably, if such questions are coming, don't worry about them. There would be 4, 5, 6, 7 questions like this, but who is asking you to solve every 100 question? You can easily leave a few questions of theirs. Lastly, where was Maratha Empire in 1857? If you all remember, 1818, the Third Anglo-Maratha War happened, and after that, the Marathas had lost. The Peshwaship was dissolved, Maratha Confederacy had been dissolved, and Out of that only, the states like Satara were created. If you remember, Satara in the previous class I have taught you was annexed under doctrine of lapse. Similarly, Nagpur annexed under doctrine of lapse. Even Jhansi was a part of this Maratha Empire only, annexed under the doctrine of lapse. Apart from that, states like Sindhias, who were a part of earlier day Marathas, at this moment they are a supporter of the British rule. In fact, they have fought against the Rani Lakshmi Bai at this point of time. So these were the questions that came, and I have answered almost every question of yours that have been given at this point of time. It's 3:35. Thank you. We will wrap our session with that. I hope you enjoyed the lecture, and best of luck if tomorrow this particular question comes in our exam. That's the only thing. Thank you. Goodbye.